Hi, I am Tony Russo from On Death Care, and this is The Rest, funeral service news for the week ending Friday, April 17th, 2026. I don't know where to start. We've got a bunch of stuff going on. I think the way that I will start is if you are watching the video, I need a haircut. It was unavoidable. I had to either work this morning or get my hair cut, but I couldn't do both. So yes, this is how my hair looks, and there's nothing that anyone can do about it. I've done my best. For those of you who are on audio, you're really better off. Anyway, lots of stuff to get to this week. We've got stuff on homesteaders. We've got stuff on Texas. We've got stuff on StoneMor. All of the big stories kind of came together this week, which is one of the reasons I still need a haircut. But there's more to tell, and we will get to it right after this. This show and all the shows I do and all the stories I write are sponsored. Everything I do is sponsored by my paid subscribers, and I'd like to invite you to become a paid subscriber on ondeathcare.com. Just go to ondeathcare.com and you can follow along. There are 2 different support levels to choose from. There are actually 3 different support levels to choose from. The first and the least expensive support level is $0. I would love it if you just subscribed. I make all of the news free, and I want to keep it that way. So if you subscribe, I will continue to send all of the news as I write it. There's stuff that goes to paid subscribers first, and there's stuff that goes to paid subscribers only. The paid subscribers only stuff is usually either commentary or previews on stories that I am going to put out. But anyway, you can find all of that at ondeathcare.com. Officially, the biggest news this week has to do with Park Lawn, which saw the departures of Jennifer Hay, Matt Forastiere, and Jay Dodds in an abrupt and, very spectacular manner. They have not been replaced. They have been dismissed. Right now, the former CFO, Markus Sturm, has been named president, and Steve Shaffer has stepped in as executive chairman. Now, one of the big things about the story is that they had with them some sheriff's deputies in full uniform and tactical gear, and that's just been driven home. And that's not what the story is about. I think it's amusing, but it's not really what it's about. As I understand it, those are part of Mr. Shaffer's kind of retinue because he is concerned because there are threats against CEOs. And he's 2 CEOs, so I guess maybe he feels doubly threatened. That's something, what I don't begrudge. If you are a CEO and you feel like you're doing the kind of things that is going to make people come after you, then, that's why you have the money for the security guards. So I begrudge no one their own personal safety. This story, though, isn't about Park Lawn. This story is at least about homesteaders. And over the last 2 years, over the last decade, but as far as I can show on my timeline, over the last 2 years, homesteaders has moved more and more toward financing consolidation. And it is pretty wound up in a lot of the Park Lawn moves over the last 2 years, even before the acquisition of Park Lawn. And so I don't know if this deal gets done in Canada because they're really kind of squirrely about having an insurance company owning a consolidator. But here it is legal, and there's nothing wrong with it from a legal perspective. It bothers me that homesteaders doesn't tend to want to be associated with Park Lawn. It makes me very nervous that every time I ask about Park Lawn, they're like, "How should we know?" I think that in my story, we're going to show how they should know about what's going on at Park Lawn. And I'll put that out on probably Monday for regular subscribers. I might do a little preview. I will do a little preview for paid subscribers in my Sunday morning column. As it stands now, it is Thursday as I'm recording this. I'm waiting for some responses back from homesteaders. I told them that I wouldn't be able to show them the story in advance, but I sent them a bunch of questions that were sticking points or where I thought that they may find sticking points in my reporting and asked them for clarification. Essentially, I asked them what their relationship is as they understand it with Park Lawn. And I don't want to say any more until I get their answer, because their answer could be completely different from what I'm saying here. So we'll leave that for now, and with a promise to follow it up, but only in writing. I don't think unless something really weird happens, I'm not going to be reporting on this on the podcast anymore. It's going to be something that you're going to have to read about at ondeathcare.com. Anyway, let's get to the rest of it, because there's plenty more this week. Trust me. Everstory Partners this week missed a kind of an important deadline with the EEOC. I reported a couple weeks ago that Everstory's former company, former name anyway, StoneMor, and one of the Everstory properties in Memphis, Tennessee, is under fire or is under suit from the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission for having a segregated bathroom policy at one of their cemeteries. And this is one of those stories where you read it 4 times and you're like, that can't be right. But it is. They were supposed to respond to the suit on April 13th. It is April 16th as I'm reporting on this. When you're going to ask for an extension in federal court, you're supposed to give 3 days notice. They did not. They showed up on the 13th, instead of filing their guilty or innocence, or instead of responding to the charges, they asked for another week to get their case together, and were granted it by the court. I have reached out to Everstory to see if they are going to pursue a defense in this or if they're going to settle. I honestly thought that they were going to settle, and that's what I had prepared to talk about today, because this is not just local employees. That one of the tricky parts in this is that this went all the way up this went much of the way up the chain of command, and the continued word was, no, these guys can't use this bathroom. It is, if you're the president of a national company and someone brings you a bathroom complaint, I don't see why you don't fire the person. I don't. If you're the vice president of, I don't know, let's make fun of SCI because they're nice and big, right? If you're the vice president of SCI and somebody calls you from a cemetery in Memphis, Tennessee, and says, "Hey, some of the black employees are trying to use the bathroom, but we want them to use the gas station down the block instead," how do you not fire that person? Right? That's the question. The fact that you take the phone call is shocking. And this is Everstory again. This is not SCI. I was just trying to make a connection there. How do you not fire the person that made the phone call? The person on the ground that can't address bathroom privilege fights in their 20-person cemetery. They get the regional involved, and they still decide that they don't want these people in the room. And so we'll see how this shakes out. It's just, I'm hoping that if they're not going to settle it, they're going to say that everything about this reporting is wrong, which I will be happy to share with you. But there's a link to the detailed EEOC filing in the show notes. I had a really good, was it Tuesday this week? I don't remember if it was Monday or Tuesday, but I'm not really much of a text message guy, but my text messages were very busy because in addition to all of the shenanigans going on at Park Lawn, Kristen Tips, who was the executive director of the Texas Funeral Service Commission, has resigned. And it was really like, you really felt like the Munchkins were going to come out and start singing about it at one point. There were so many people who were so just relieved. And that's definitely what you want when you resign. You want just sighs of relief from all over the state. There's not been much reporting on the whys of it. There's been plenty of speculation, and I'm going to speculate a little tiny bit here, again, based on the 10,000 text messages I got. Either this Texas monthly story that is due out sooner rather than later, it has got like a huge firebomb in it, or the epic suit is going to be a lost. I'll bring you up to speed as quickly as I can, although there's links to all of these things in the show notes, and this is kind of a big story. So Kristen Tips is in trouble for, among other things, the way that she's handling the Muslim burial in Plano. I believe it's Plano, Texas. The epic is what it's called. I don't remember what it stands for, but it's a Muslim cemetery, and we've talked about this on the show several times recently. There are a lot of Christian type practices that are rejected by Muslims and Jews, but for some reason, when Muslims are trying to just do their body washing and put their people in the ground, it drives some people crazy for no good reason, specifically in Texas and in Minnesota for again, I don't know if that's just where it's reported or if it's like that all over. So there's the epic thing. And then, of course, there's like been selling of funeral director licenses under the doors. There's been ignoring all sorts of inspection problems that has led to all sorts of different shenanigans over there. So I don't know if it's going to be the Texas Monthly story or one of the several lawsuits that have been filed against both Tips and the state because of her leadership decisions. But either way, she is gone and people seem to be really, really happy about it. I do not know what this will do for the Texas Funeral Service Commission. I don't know if they're going to resume inspections, for example. But I do know, and this is also linked in the show notes, that a man named Javion Major, who's been a big part of this story, is now on the run. I've been speaking with a couple of people whose funerals he ruined. He's the kind of guy who will go to a family and say, "Hey, I was friends with your recently deceased loved one. I'll handle the funeral for you. I'll do it cheap." He doesn't do it cheap and he doesn't handle it. And he's had his license suspended and revoked, but he just keeps performing funerals. And eventually, apparently, he's been caught out at it. And this might be the first pull in a long net. I mean, Tips was also involved in you remember the body, the embalming kind of scandal. There was an embalming company that was paying a funeral home to practice different techniques on different body parts. And it's been a long 2 years in Texas as well. So we'll see how that shakes out, and I'll have more reporting on that as I have some more facts to bring you. But there's a link I'll actually do a summary, and I'll put the link to the summary in the show notes. When people say really dumb things about funeral service or vicious things about disposition, I always share them because I want you guys to know the kind of, talk that is out there. However, it would be irresponsible and unfair of me not to share this quote from Casey Murdoch. He is an Oklahoma state senator. He is a Republican, and he is very frustrated with the talk around the human composting laws that are under consideration in their state. And I want to read to you what he said in the local paper, and I'll link to the whole story. But it's just nice. It was nice to see just a little tiny bit of honesty. And of course, this is something that I've personally said, so I'm always flattered when someone has the almost exact same opinion as me. The rhetoric surrounding this bill is absurd, Senator Murdoch said of the human composting bill opponents. If we believe in free markets, we must support families who want options and flexibility while grieving a lost loved one. Funerals are cost prohibitive for many families. This measure provides a much cheaper alternative to a loved one during a family's most difficult time. The measure includes guardrails and criminal penalties if this material is used in food production. If this legislation becomes law, these guardrails will ensure this proposal has the strongest oversight in the nation. This is the part I like. Those who continue to criticize this measure are intentionally uninformed, unserious, and just lying about this bill because they are desperate for social media clicks. Yes, thank you. Can I get an amen? I'm going to disagree with him on the food safe part, and that'll bear out. That's going to take a long time to kind of find its way out, and hopefully I'll do some reporting that will either support or not support. But I'm working on a story about how and the degree to which human compost containing former human remains is food safe and to what extent. But anyway, a link to the story in the show notes as they continue to kind of plug along there in Oklahoma. I'm sorry. It's also important to say that it's a little bit less expensive, but I don't know if human composting is so markedly less expensive than other options that it's fair to mention it as such. But I mean, that's what he said, and I just want to, correct his record while I'm bolstering my own. Anyway, link to that in the show notes. And just a brief note: there's a story out of England about a A.W. Lim or Lime company funeral director and all the different things they do, and they're one of the largest funeral director companies in the UK, and this is really just kind of a sponsored article about the different things that they can do at a funeral, but mostly it had a lot to do with how they bury football fans, soccer fans, because there are apparently a huge call for these things. And I said this in a social media post. That's not my thing. I don't love the idea of branded anything. Maybe it's because I'm a Mets fan and I don't know what it's like to, I'd rather be dead than be a Mets fan, but I certainly don't want them at my funeral if I can help it whatsoever. So it's really just a story about disposition. But the reason I bring it up is because one of the things that they do, and having said how much I'm not interested in it, is they have a final whistle. And if there is anything appropriate about, it's something that appeals to me rather about this, it's the idea of the final whistle, because I don't know of any other sports like that. Rugby may be similar, where you have that extra time. If you don't watch soccer or football, I'm going to call it soccer for my own sake. If you don't watch soccer, it's 90 minutes long, but there's only like one guy on the whole planet who knows how long the game is going to be, and that's the ref. And he's got his little clicker in his hand, and they put in extra time on the TV, and they're guessing, and they're always a couple seconds off. Sometimes they're a little bit more than a couple seconds off. So when the whistle blows, it's like you're waiting for it, and then it's like that whoo, and the game is over. And it's just such a great metaphor for death. Like, it's coming. No, it's coming. You don't know when, but it's going to come. And the final whistle is the final whistle. Unless it's going into overtime, but the final whistle in overtime is the final whistle in overtime. The point is game over, and this is the sound of game over. And it's the sound of game over without a lot of warning. And I don't know, I just think that that's particularly poignant in a otherwise kind of memorialization that's just not my speed. Anyway, there's a link to the advertorial in the show notes. And finally, I want to mention one of my own stories on death care about Rachel Mackey, and she is a funeral director in Washington, D.C., who has recently testified to the D.C. Council about the need for dual licensure in the district. Now, This is a really kind of prickly subject that I really would love to unpack. And if you have an opinion, no, I know you have an opinion. If you care to, please share your opinion with me, because I'm trying to collect kind of everybody's sense of the goods and the bads of that. So, we've got an education system question that won't go away. And the question, overly simplified, is, are you training people to be tradesmen, or are you training them to be professionals? The analogy that someone else made was, it's really like the difference between being a doctor and being an electrician. When you get your electrician's license, you go to school, they're like, don't touch this, don't touch this. And then you go and you work under an electrician and he's like, don't touch this, don't touch this, don't touch this. And then you're an electrician. When you're a doctor, you go to medical school and you learn all about the history and practice of medicine. But then you go out and they're like, okay, well, if you want to be this kind of doctor, these are the things you have to do. And it's a different attitude. It's the attitude of, should you show up knowing pretty much everything you need to know and needing just a little direction about which wires to touch in this situation? Or should you become a funeral director with the idea that you know about the history of funeral service and you know about all of the different practices for real in a really deep and meaningful way, and then find a way to focus yourself, find a funeral home that works for you and focus yourself on that. And with the licensure kind of tied up, not necessarily tied up in embalming. I don't want to put it that way at all. I think everyone should, if not learn to embalm, certainly learn to, deal with a dead body. So what this would do in DC, and there are several other dual licensures like this, is whatever embalming you do in mortuary school, that's the embalming that you have to do. And then when you get out of mortuary school and get a job, then you can either rack up hours as an embalmer, or rack up hours as a funeral director, or rack up hours as both. And that will define the kind of license that you hold. It's not novel. It's occurring more and more. But it's a lot to ask of someone who knows they're never going to embalm, or someone who who knows they're never going to want to sit with a family, to make them sit with a family. However, there's nowhere world where it makes sense to not do both. I've spoken myself with too many people who are like, I always thought I just wanted to be an embalmer. And then I met with a couple families because they made me. And all of a sudden I'm like, I want to serve families, and this is the primary thing I want to do. And so, but there is the economic pull, right? Everybody says that there's not enough people, there's not enough skilled people, and they're expensive, and so, do we want a world of mostly funeral assistants working under one director? There's so much at stake in all of these changes. And it's something that we should consider in individual states and also nationally. And that's the other tricky point. Moving license from state to state, the oldest complaint in the world, I know, but it is something that really would do well to be addressed. And what I got a kick out of in this story was that the NFDA actually reached out to Rachel, because people call them all the time. Hi, I'm, Senator Russo's, yeah, as if, right? I'm Senator Jones's secretary, and we need you guys to testify on behalf of the industry at an upcoming thing. And the NFDA says, well, the states do that. We don't do that. We do that nationally. The states do it themselves. DC doesn't have an association, so that's how Rachel Mackey got the call. I think she did a brilliant job, and there's a link to that story in the show notes. And speaking of consolidators, we are approaching our next earnings season. Q1 for some, Q2 for others. Carriage announced this week that it is maintaining its dividend, and this is something like 16 years that they have paid out the same dividend without missing any. And Matthews International put out their announcement that they would be paying a dividend as well. And I don't know if I missed it or if it's going to come out after I hit publish, but SCI almost certainly will have that announcement in the next couple days. And then probably in May, my February, March, April, May, I feel like in the middle of the middle of May, we may have all of our earnings reports. And of course, I'll cover them. I'll be on the calls and I'll let you know what they said and what I think it means for you. So another great reason. Now that one, I don't do very many videos on the earnings stuff because it's a little wonky, but it's always interesting. I think, I think there are really great stories to come out of these earnings calls. And there will be, part of what I write that week. So again, please subscribe at ondeathcare.com. And that will do it for this time. On Death Care has been sponsored by my paid subscribers. Thank you very much for your support. It allows me to do this, which I really love to do. And I genuinely appreciate all of my subscribers, all of you guys who have subscribed. And I will try to earn your attention every week. I say it every week. I mean it every week. And I'm going to try to do it again next week. If you have anything that you would like to hear about, if you have any stories that you feel aren't getting told or aren't being told in a way that understands how death care works, reach out and let me know, and I will look into them. If you think that I'm doing it, reach out and tell me where I'm wrong, and I would be happy to have that conversation with you as well. My email address is bytonyrusso@gmail.com, or you can just click on the link in the show notes, and that'll bring you to a place where you can reach out to me. Thanks so much for listening. Please subscribe, and I will check in with you next time.